safe. So we are going to talk about housing in New York City during COVID-19 this morning. We're going to go over what the eviction moratorium is and it stands today, the Tenant Safe Harbor Act, which was recently passed into law, how housing court is working, what to do if you receive a notice of eviction, legislation or laws that are in the Senate and in the Assembly, maybe should be passing something soon, hopefully, what to do to protect yourself, how you can get some help, and as Emma said, asylum seekers and undocumented tenants, what additional resources are available to you.
Marilia, if I could just jump in, your audio is breaking up a little bit for us. It sounds like it might be an earphone issue.
Can you hear me now?
It's still the same challenge. We'll bear with you.
Can you hear me now?
It's a little bit better now. And do you want to try leaving the meeting and rejoining and seeing if it resets audio?
Can you hear me now?
This is a little bit better.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. This is the era we live in, is troubleshooting Zoom.
Okay, let's try this again. So this is the agenda. We're going to be going over what eviction moratorium is, the act that can assist tenants who have lost income, housing court, what to do if you receive a notice of eviction, proposed legislation, how to protect yourself, where you can get help, and some resources for undocumented tenants. So on March 30th of this year, Governor Cuomo ordered a 90-day suspension of all evictions. That is long gone, but the court itself, the New York State Court, has extended this suspension until at least October 1st. When we get sooner to that date, we'll know if it gets extended any longer than that. What this means is that there will be no evictions until at least October 1st. Landlords can file new cases for non-payment, but they will not go forward until at least October 1st. Any warrant of eviction that has been issued cannot go forward. It is suspended until, again, at least October 1st. Cases that were in court prior to the court shutdown started to move forward if mostly the ones that have two attorneys, so an attorney representing the landlord and an attorney representing the tenant. If these go forward and a judgment of eviction is warranted, still no evictions until October 1st. And any building where the landlord receives federal funds or the mortgage is federally backed, no evictions can begin until today, August 25th, and that is pursuant to the CARES Act that was signed in April, I believe. On June 30th, Governor Cuomo signed the Tenant Safe Harbor Act. This law protects tenants who suffered financial hardship. So anybody who either lost income or lost hours at work, no longer making the same amount of income as they were prior to COVID, has a defense if they are taken to court for non-payment. This only protects you the time period during the state of emergency. So March 7th through whenever the state governor declares this pandemic over. So if your landlord files a case against you, which they can, as of June, they were able to start again, you're going to receive something in the mail. You let them know that you
lost your job because of the pandemic, your income was reduced, and this is your defense. What this means is that you will not be evicted, but you will have to pay the rental arrears. So the judge can order you to pay back whatever it is you owe in rent, but they will not remove you from the home. And this is under this Tenant Safe Harbor Act, which was recently passed in June. And it only applies to rent that you owe after March 7th. So if you had any rent that you owed in February or January, that does not qualify. There are other protections you can use. For example, an HP, which is a housing part case. If your apartment is not suitable for living, you have repair issues, you file a case against the landlord. And this can also be a form of defense against not paying rent, depending on the repairs that you need and how bad the issues are. Your security deposit, I know a lot of people have heard that you can use a security deposit to pay a month that you owe in rent due to the pandemic. Every landlord, if the tenant chooses to use the security deposit, the landlord must use it. This is at the tenant's option. If the tenant does not want to use the security deposit, they don't have to. However, keep in mind that if you do use the security deposit, you must pay that deposit back before leaving, or you must obtain renter's insurance so that at the time that you do leave, whenever that is, and there is some damages or that the landlord would have normally have used a security deposit for, the renter's insurance would cover that. If you do decide to use this and the landlord and the tenant agree that a security deposit will be used to cover a month or however much security deposit you have. Some people do a full month, some people do half a month, whatever it is that you decide that you have able to use, it must be in writing. It could be an email, could be a text message. It just has to be in writing in some form. Landlords are not allowed to charge late fees or any penalties for non-payment for the time period from March 20th through August 20th. This also includes Con Edison and National Grid. They are not charging late fees and they are not issuing shut-off notices during this time. So as I mentioned earlier, if you had a pending court case prior to the court closing and you were representing yourself, you're probably going to get a notice in the mail where your case has been postponed. By now, it's probably been postponed 3 or 4 times. It'll be postponed once again so that you can obtain a legal services attorney if you can't afford one. Any non-payments filed after March 17th are not going forward until at least October 1st again. And like I mentioned, if you are sued, you'll receive a postcard in the mail that'll say, you've been sued by your landlord, you have to call a certain number to answer. And if the Tenant Safe Harbor Act protects you, then you tell them that you lost your income or you couldn't pay your rent because of that. So they will note it and it needs to be in the case file. Just make sure that you do mention that when you call that phone number. However, evictions for non-payments are the only ones that are on hold. Any eviction for a holdover or any other reason are not on hold. Those are still going forward. So if you do have a holdover case, there are a number of steps the landlord has to do before you're actually in court. They need to send you what is called a predicate notice, or it's a letter stating their intent to sue and why they're suing. They have to file an affirmation in court and then send the tenants a notice. Once they do all this, then they file the case in court. Then you'll receive a notice from the court saying there's a case against you. If you did not receive any of those documents, that is also a defense to the case. You must let the court know that you didn't receive any of that or that it was not timely issued to you. Either way, if it's a non-payment or a holdover, most likely it'll be virtual on Zoom, or I believe they use Skype. And you do need to let the court know why it is that you didn't pay your rent, especially if it was because you were affected by the pandemic. If a tenant does not show up to an eviction proceeding, the courts are not defaulting, which means the landlord is not automatically winning, which would have happened pre-COVID. If a tenant or a defendant doesn't show up to court, it's an automatic win for the landlord. So don't worry if you don't show up, this is not going to affect you. And mostly right now, the first court dates that are going forward, they are adjourned again so that the tenants can look for an attorney. If you receive a notice of eviction because it was either a case prior to COVID-19 or for whatever reason you received something from the court, marshals cannot evict anybody again until October 1st, 2020. Any eviction notice that was issued prior to the shutdown in March is invalid, which means that the landlord must take you to court again and start the process over. If you live in federally subsidized housing or the landlord has a federal mortgage, no evictions until today. They can start filing evictions today. If you receive a marshal's notice, you must. I didn't get that. Sorry. If you receive a marshal's notice, you must contact the court and you must file an order to show cause, which tells the court, you know, I received this notice. I cannot be evicted because of the moratorium or because of the court's extension on the moratorium. And you can, usually you do that by going into the courthouse. It's just one form you fill out. I believe you can do that now over the phone, or you can call the Department of Investigations of New York City and they will put all these marshals on hold. These evictions, I'm sorry. If you see a marshal in your building trying to evict somebody, you can call the police. You can call the Department of Investigations because they are not allowed to be doing this during this time. So there has been one law that was passed, which is the Tenant Safe Harbor Act, but it's not enough to protect tenants. What that law does, it just prevents you from being evicted, but you still have to pay your rent or the arrears that you've accrued during the pandemic. For a lot of people, this is impossible because they've lost 4 or 5 months of work and will not be able to pay back all that money that was lost. So the government has to do something else. They have to do more to help tenants. Right now, there are 4 pieces of legislation or proposed law that are sitting in the state government. The first one is the Rent and Mortgage Cancellation Act. That is to, as it's called, to cancel rent. Cancel all the rent that has accrued during this time. There's also the Emergency Housing Stability and Displacement Prevention Act. Does similar, it's very similar to the Cancellation Act. The Housing Access Voucher Program, that is similar to Section 8, where you would get a voucher to pay for the rent. And then there's the Representative Omar Federal Rent Bill. That is a blanket cancel rent proposed bill. Again, this is what's sitting in government. Nothing has been passed yet, but until something is passed, you have to pay your rent, and that is not enough. Postponing when you pay the rent is not enough to help people who were out of jobs for this time. Ways you can protect yourself as a tenant. Contact a community-based organization or a lawyer. Find out if the housing you live in is federally subsidized or federally backed mortgage. You have a little bit extra protections. Know your options if you cannot pay for rent. You should start off by, if you're eligible to apply for a one-shot deal. A one-shot deal is a program with the city of New York City, where you apply for rental arrears, for payment of rental arrears. The city will, if you are approved, they will pay your rental arrears directly to the landlord. They do, however, require that somebody in the household have an immigration status. So somebody needs to have a social security number. Doesn't have to be the head of the household. It could be a child. It just has to be somebody in the household. It's an application process. You can do it through HRA. And if you're approved, they'll pay the rental arrears directly to the landlord. This is something that they've been doing pre-COVID, so it's not COVID related. We don't know how many people will benefit or continue to benefit from it because a lot of people now have rental arrears. You can also try to see what happens with the proposed legislation if something is passed, or you can try to work something out with your landlord. I have heard a lot of landlords who, have begrudgingly but have entered into payment plans with their tenants for the arrears, or have been trying to work something out where the tenant pays whatever their monthly rent now plus a little bit of what is owed. You should start there. That is probably the best thing you can do until we get some sort of assistance from the government. And any documents you receive from the landlord, you should document how you received it, when you received it, so that if you are taken to court and it was improperly mailed to you or delivered to you, again, as I mentioned, that is a defense. So you should have all of that notated. Where can you get this help? You can get this help in community-based organizations. You can call 311 and you ask for the tenant hotline or helpline. They should be able to assist you with free legal assistance through the HRA office. New York City has a right to counsel law, which means that you have a right to a free attorney. So you can call 311, ask for the tenant helpline. They will ask you for your zip code and that way direct you to attorneys who work under this right to counsel law. Call your local city council member, the public advocate, Jimani Williams, the mayor's office to protect tenants, state and federal officials. You can call all these numbers. They all have an office or a program that assists tenants with rental arrear situations, especially now during COVID-19. Lastly, other than rental assistance, there are some other resources for undocumented tenants. Access NYC has a variety of services where immigration status does not matter, emergency cash assistance, housing stability to avoid shelter entry, an emergency food assistance program. You can call 311 to get assistance with these three things mentioned on the screen. All New York City public school students will automatically receive a pandemic EBT card worth $420. That is all food benefit. There is no need to apply for that. It'll be automatically sent to the students. And you can also go into the Community Solidarity Fund, and they had some grants that were able to assist some undocumented tenants. We understand how the government pretty much has failed undocumented tenants, and unfortunately there isn't much that can be done. We do know that New York City is trying to help undocumented tenants as much as they can. They do have these three options here. Take advantage of that if you need it, if you can get your hands on it. Unfortunately, they did have a pandemic program where if you qualified, they were going to pay a certain amount of the rental arrears, but one of the criteria is that you needed to have some sort of immigration status. Unfortunately, I know a lot of people were unable to apply just right off the bat because they didn't have immigration status, but that is because the money the $100 million that was tied to this application or to this relief comes from the federal government. So they set the rules, and one of the rules was that you had to have some sort of immigration status. But those of you who were able to apply, it will take a little while to get answers. But in the meantime, keep in mind you have some other options regarding rental arrears. That is all I have for you guys. So if anybody has any questions.
Great, thank you so much, Marilia. We'll turn it over to a Q&A now. If anybody wants to jump in and ask a question, please feel free. If you don't feel comfortable asking the question, you're welcome to write it in the chat and I can ask it on your behalf.
Hi, everyone. Maria, I think it was a really great presentation. I saw a lot of great information. Would it be possible to receive a copy of these slides should it have been a little too fast for everyone to pick up at the moment it was announced or provided?
Yeah, Jasmine, we'll be posting the slides as well as a recording of the presentation to our website. I'll send that link around once it's posted to everyone who RSVP'd. And then people can always find it on our website under our resources tab.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jasmine. We have one question in the chat. What are the challenges faced by asylum seekers due to access to housing in the city?
Do you mean housing as in public housing or just housing in general?
I think the question is public housing.
I believe public housing does not ask you your immigration status. I believe that is, New York City has discrimination laws, and nationality immigration is one of the protected classes, so they should not be asking about your immigration status. However, public housing is very competitive. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but there is an application process, and if there is something available, they will contact the applicant once that, your number comes up. But there is income requirement or income criteria eligibility, family composition sizes. So depending on where you would fall in is what is available at the time. You have to have a certain amount of income for the family size you have. But if your question relates directly to immigration, and if you're an asylum seeker or an asylee, that should not disqualify you from public housing.
Great, thanks, Marilia. Another question coming into the chat is, can someone who is already receiving rental assistance through DSS or HRA, but cannot afford to pay the difference for these last couple of months, be eligible for a one-shot deal?
The first thing you should do is, if you are receiving rental assistance from HRA, you need to let them know that your income changed, because then your assistance will change depending on what your income changed. So you should be receiving more assistance if you now have less income. That should be your first step. After that, if you still need assistance, then you are eligible for a one-shot deal. You're eligible to apply. It's still an application process, and it is, they have to decide how much of it they can pay, if anything. But your first step is to contact HRA directly and let them know that you have lost income and when.
Great, thank you.
And that goes for anybody receiving Section 8 or any rental assistance. You need to, since it is income-based and your income becomes zero, your rental assistance should now be more. But you need to let them know, they have no way of knowing that your income changed without you letting them know.
Great. We'll offer another moment for anyone who has questions. Again, feel free to ask them yourselves or put them in the chat. And I'll use this pause as people maybe consider questions to let everyone know that we are offering housing consultations with Marilia. So if you have a question you want to raise that is more private, or you don't want to raise it in this public forum, you can go to our website and sign up for a housing consultation to have a one-on-one conversation. So please know that resource is there for those of you who are joining us from other service provider organizations. Please feel free to refer your clients to that as well. Great. Well, with that, everyone, we'll begin to wrap up this portion of the presentation. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Marilia, for presenting. Marilia is going to stay on to do the same presentation in Spanish at 12:15. We'll post both this and the Spanish presentation, the slides and the recording, to the website, and I'll send you all an email when that is posted. So stay posted to hear from me. Because we have a couple extra minutes, if anybody wants to kind of stay on to ask any questions with a smaller group, please feel free. Otherwise, we'll see you all later.